Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richest Men In Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town.
You know what, man? Let me back up for a second.
That's a good-looking T-shirt, dude. You have swag. You have richest men in town swag.
Yeah, man.
That's sexy. That's sexy.
My kids are all excited because they want to design the shirts. They think they can.
Let's go.
Shirts. I said, yeah, do it. Throw it together. Let's put them together.
Let's get some kids designing shirts.
Yeah.
And we'll hand them out like lollipops.
Yeah, that's right, man. That's right.
You come on the show, you get a shirt.
Yeah, that's right.
And a bumper sticker.
So listen. And let me go back to our podcast in all seriousness on the numbers. I will say this. I am glad that people are listening to it because not because of you and I, but because of what these other people that have come on have contributed to the show. I feel like there's some stuff that is in fact, the past week, I've been going back through our episodes and making notes just about some things, some takeaways, in preparation for this episode, right? And I'm just thinking, man, there's some people that have opened up and kind of showed us their souls and some good things have filtered through that, you know. So
yeah, I love the feedback that we are getting, the Facebook comments. The texts, the emails. I was with a coworker yesterday.
Yeah.
A female coworker, Tyler Gould.
Right.
The show's called Richest Men in Town. We've made no qualms about our target audience, but the ladies are tuning in.
Yeah.
Right? She was talking about how she starts every day walking the dog, listening to the Mike and Tyler show.
Man,
and I kind of dig that, right? Or maybe it was the Tyler and Mike show.
Yeah,
no, I like the sound of Mike and Tyler show.
As long as my name's somewhere in there, I don't care how far down the list. It's fine with me.
Yeah, so stories like that. There's a lake here in Redding, California, where a lot of folks, it's right in the center of a residential area, and Mary Lake. A lot of people head out in the morning, walk the dogs, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And somebody put up on our Facebook page that they were walking Mary Lake and they heard somebody walking the lake listening to our podcast very loud.
Oh, seriously? That was you, right? In the bushes with it on.
Yeah, I got my boombox. Do they say that anymore?
Yeah, it's right up there with the Rolodex, the boombox, man.
Yeah.
You know? That'll be our second sponsor. Rolodex and boombox.
And Walkman. This episode is brought to you by Sony Walkman, now celebrating 40 years of cassette listening technology.
It's good stuff, man. But yeah, the other thing that I've been really encouraged about, Mike, is I've had people, I think you and I both have experienced this in the last few weeks anyway, people reaching out to us asking to be on the show, and that's been kind of a cool experience too. So, it's good stuff. I think at the end of the day that we all want to, I do believe this, that everybody wants to be better, and no matter where they're at, and they're trying to, people are good and they're trying to do good things. And if we can get people on the show that can remind all of us that there's a way to be good and we don't have to be freaked out by the idea that we can be better, then shoot, we all win, right?
Yeah, I think I need to temper the frustration I have with myself sometimes. We've talked before that we can be pretty harsh critics. And I really think that as I listen to the guests that we've had, um, I can really take away something from every episode that
Yeah.
is doable, right? I don't have to, like Stephen Mitchell would say, I don't have to go in the room and beat myself with reeds, right?
Right. Yeah. Right.
Because there are a lot of teachers, right? If we're going through life and we're trying to learn how to be better, man, it's amazing what is presented. You know,
Yeah. And
it could be
I
your
find,
neighbor,
yeah.
it could be your Uber driver. I mean, there's a lot of different people with a lot of cool stories that, um, so we're 11 episodes in and we've had the opportunity to catch up with a few people. I'm all ears now.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what I love is, that it's, a lot of the people that we've had on have been sort of, taken aback by the invite with the conversation they've had with us off the air is, why in the world would you want me on this show? And I hope everybody that's heard the episodes so far could answer that question to the people that we've had on the show. Why wouldn't they have you on the show? With the things that you were able to share and willing to share. And the other thing that struck me too, is I was kind of going through the episodes, re-listening to things and taking notes, is that there's a lot of recurring themes, maybe presented in different ways, but I think there's a lot of recurring themes, that sort of made me, want to take pause and make sure that I've got those things in my square in my vision,
Well, and I think that one of the reasons why we wanted to stop and connect just the two of us with no guests, we'll do that from time to time because it's our show and we can.
That's right.
But I do think it's good to stop and kind of digest some of the things that we have taken in as a result of having guests on the show. We always talk about the episode impacting people's lives, and do something with the message Rajiv gives you. Do something with something that Alan Michael Boson says. And so I thought that it would be good for us to eyeball to eyeball check in with ourselves as husbands and fathers with, like, at this stage in the game, this thing is still in its infancy.
Right.
But we are doing this to be better. So I guess the question is, what's sticking?
Yeah. Well,
10 episodes in, right?
Let me share this. I got a text from someone yesterday, and they sent me this scripture attached to a message about how they liked our show. And it's Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another, right? We've talked about that principle anyway in different, with different language, but I think that's the whole idea, right? And that's the beautiful thing about just relationships in general, right? If we do them the right way, we're building each other up. And I think that this podcast maybe gives us, Mike, you and I, an opportunity to deepen some relationships with some people, and to create some new relationships with some people. But at the same time, we're being built up by our guests. So I've been loving it, man. It's been a ton of fun. So I'm liking it.
Okay, but here's the question, right?
Yeah.
If I were to bring Miss Ricky Gould and have her on as a guest right now, or your kids,
Mm-hmm.
would they say that they can tell that dad is different?
I don't know.
Okay, because
I would love to have that.
I know that that's an unfair question, but that's what this show's about.
That is 100% what this show's about. And I don't know what they would say. I think that I'm trying, to be different. I sent a letter yesterday.
Whoa, back up. Like a letter?
Well, can we call them letters still? It was electronic, dude. I mean, to a group of church people, members of the church. And
I think we call those epistles.
I think, don't you have to be wearing sandals and deliver those on foot to be an epistle? I don't know. but I sent,
so you wrote an epistle yesterday.
I wrote an epistle, and then I sent it electronically to some people. And one of those people, I wanted to just share that with my wife. And the whole point of it was just to talk about hope. I mean, we're kind of in this time when we've all been sort of sequestered or told to be sheltered in place for such a long time, at least here in California, that I think it starts to mess with your mind a little bit, and hope can start to dwindle. And so I just sent this thing out to some people, and the gist of it was, let's count our blessings and let's remember all of the good things that have happened up to this point. And what I told them in the letter was that I will, right now, I'm focused on remembering the hand of God in my life and the blessings in my life. And I said, so I'm going to recite that list of all the blessings that I've received. And on that list is all of you people, right? Because I think that that's the important thing, is that people are important. And I share that with you because my wife was a little like, she got it. She was like, why are you sending this out, for one, right? She's asking me that. And then two, she made the comment that she felt like I have been thinking more about other people lately. And I feel like, hey, if that's a commentary, I mean, I don't know what that says about me 2 weeks ago, but for today, I'll take it, right? That we're trying to make some progress.
Yeah, and as long as we're doing that in the dishes, like,
yeah,
I think it's important that the people nearest and dearest to me see me trying. Because in the end, this episode is a lot of talk, right? These episodes, this podcast is a lot of people spending time talking, and that talking needs to translate into action. And I think that's what we're trying to convey in every episode that we're doing. And I would actually like to get better, just thinking about and reflecting on where we've been so far. I'd like to get better at highlighting maybe some takeaways when we are talking about our guests, right? So that we can almost package it so that listeners can know that in this episode, there's going to be a couple of challenges, right? Or a couple of things that you can take away specifically from that guest. Because I think every episode, you and I right now could probably go through and share takeaways from each of our guests that have really impacted. And I don't want to be too intentional about it, because that's part of it, right? As you're listening, what you hear and what I hear may be two different things.
Well, I like that, though. I think that maybe we should do that here in a minute. Let's talk about those, because I'd like to compare my notes to your notes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's great when when you go and you listen to a speaker who's got a message and they share that message. And then I come home and my wife and I talk about the message that we just heard, and her takeaway is totally different than from what my takeaway was. Right. And I love that, because then I'm like, oh, shoot, I missed that. Like, let me write that down. I want to make sure I pick up on that too. But I want to go back to one of the question you asked earlier. You said, if I asked your kids or your wife, would they say that Tyler is different, right? I think the answer that goes back to what you said too. I would prefer it if my kids and my wife would say Tyler is trying to be different, because in the trying, right, that's where we start to refine things. And 10 episodes or 11 episodes doesn't make Tyler a different person, but it begins to shift my mindset on some things, and it begins to make me try to do things a little bit differently. So,
but over the 10 or 11, is there something that hit harder than the others?
Oh
right?
man,
'Cause that is my fear too, because we're 10 in. What happens when we're 600 in, right? I mean, I think it's important um, that we really look at the lessons that are being presented and almost run some triage on ourselves.
yeah, I
Right?
agree.
I don't need to have 2 or 3 things from 10 episodes, because that gets into that congested radar screen, right? Where all of a sudden now I'm trying to do 20 or 30 things.
Yeah, and I think, and that's why I was saying earlier. I think I went back and listened to the episodes. I was making notes, and I was writing two. I did write 2 or 3 things from every one that stood out to me. But then as I look back over my list, I would say that those 2 or 3 things became maybe 5 things in total from all those episodes. There's a lot of common themes that maybe Stephen Mitchell says differently than Quinn Lowry says, but they're the same. They're the same lesson, and I think that lesson is conveyed differently by those 2 individuals based on their experience and and the circumstances, right? But there's some similarities. One of the things that stood out to me, like if I can talk about Toby Crawford for a second, and in episode 3, and Toby talked about the Dawn Wall. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
The Dawn Wall.
Yeah.
And right, and he talked about how you could go and you can finish the task by yourself, or you can bring people with you, and you can have those people with you to enjoy it. And I love the imagery of that, the Dawn Wall. I love that story. I love Toby's, the passion in his voice when he shares that. Like it's so real. But then I could also jump ahead to episode 9, and I could think about Kurt Holmgren. And Kurt Holmgren's talked about sitting in front of people's houses and dragging them with them to church events and all this stuff, right? And he says sometimes you want to bring the people that you love with you. And isn't that message and the message of the Dawn Wall exactly the same?
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like those are those kind of themes that I'm talking about, that maybe they're related differently on the podcast by different individuals, but it's the same message, and that we want to surround ourselves with good people, and the people that we really love, we want them to be better. Right. And we hope that they want us to be better. And I think that's there's some, I think that you and I could probably go through and pick those things out across the board.
Yeah, I thought, in fact, interestingly enough, I had the opportunity to spend this last weekend with Toby, and we were able to debrief now that I've seen Dawn Wall. Because at the time he mentions Dawn Wall in the show, I had not seen that.
Yeah.
And wow, right? I mean,
Right.
I think that's a very powerful image, because it
Yeah.
was right there.
Right.
6 years, 7 years of work, and your
Right.
goal is right there.
Yeah.
And you now stop everything and go support somebody through the hardest thing they'll ever do, so that they
Yeah.
can be a part of it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And so that they can see the beauty of the end. Right. I mean, it's just, it's a powerful deal. So listen, let me ask you this, Mike. Let's talk about Toby for a second. You spent some time with him. Give me some things that stood out to you, that you, if you were to tell someone, hey, you got to listen to episode 3 with Toby Crawford. What's your takeaway from episode 3?
As I think about what resonated with me, and what, it's been several weeks since we had the opportunity to sit down with Toby and record that episode. I am impressed. In my mind, I'm a one-word guy, right? At work right now, this year coming up into this school year, is going to be a crazy climb, right? And professionally, I work with educators, and so my one word is forward. Just go forward. And when I think of Toby's conversation, forward, a prayer of just being able to jog, turned into a marathon, turned into a Boston qualifier.
Right.
Like, for me, that gives me hope that with gratitude and asking Heavenly Father's help, little things can become really, really important things. And I'm not even saying that from a physical challenge standpoint, right? Like, the person that I want to be is attainable if I can be grateful for the blessings that I have, and I can ask for help. Right? Those are the lessons that I get from Toby. The other thing that really stands out to me is that whole kidney transplant thing. That seed was planted
Right.
way before that moment.
Yeah.
By a loving parent.
Yeah.
And as a loving parent, I need to be able to have the vision, right? To be able to see that I am planting seeds by the things I do and by the things I say for their future and their great moments. How great would it be for my kids to do something that has a significant impact on the life of another person, and in the end, they turn to me and say, I learned that because of that thing you taught me when I was 9.
Yeah, I think that, right, if we want to pick out recurring themes yet again, I mean, think about what you just said about Toby's experience, hearing his dad offer to do that same act for someone else. And then what did we just learn about Stephen Mitchell in episode 11, right? With his experience with his mom and dad. I think that that's a theme, right? And here's the interesting thing, right? Because not everyone is going to sit and listen and go, oh yeah, like my mom and dad taught me some stuff that has changed my life for the better, right? Some people haven't had the rosiest of experiences, but I think that when you listen to a Toby Crawford or a Stephen Mitchell share those experiences, it does force you to kind of reflect and maybe look at those experiences through a different filter. And I think that's a good thing. You know, I mean, I think time can soften some things.
But I think that across these episodes and throughout this whole project, I hope people understand that Tyler Gould and Mike Freeman are saying the pen is in your hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your story is written by you, not by conditions that created you, not by the way you came into the world or who raised you. Yeah, there are some challenges, right? There are some things in life. And I think that's another opportunity for us, right? To tap into the people that have overcome challenges. Because when I go through this list, everybody's coming from a pretty great background.
Yeah.
Right?
I think, yeah. And I think too that you know, that you know, I don't want to discount what or set aside the challenges that people have gone through. But I think you're 100% right. You know, I was speaking to someone close to me a while ago, and they were lamenting kind of their choices. And I said, well, then just change. Like, just make some changes, man. You know, and they said, I am what I am, right? I can't change. And I just thought, man, that's a sad way to go through life. If we have no hope, you know, and we just we don't feel empowered to do anything different. And that's what I feel like. If we listen to 10, 11 episodes of the Richest Men in Town, and in particular our guests on those episodes, that's another theme, right, Mike? This idea that they've changed their circumstance somehow. And you know, Toby Crawford with his injury, right, changed his circumstance somehow. He didn't just decide to accept the fact that he was not going to be able to run. I mean, Toby's a freak of nature. I mean, look, I made a note. I got my notes right here in front of me, and I have written down under Toby Crawford, dude gave a freaking kidney. Right? That's what I wrote down. So I think, I mean, Toby's a different animal. But
well, let me turn it to Quinn. I know that Quinn's episode really moved you.
Yeah.
So this far removed from the recording of Quinn's episode, what is still moving in you about what Quinn said?
I admire Quinn. I think that, and I don't, maybe it's because you and I know Quinn a little better. We've been around him for a long time, but here's some things that really stood out to me with Quinn is one, that this idea of being a creator, right? And I love that. I love his passion for that. And not just his passion as it pertains to his work as an architect, but just everything that he does. I think Quinn's a builder. He's a builder, and you know what? He's a builder of people that probably doesn't recognize his ability to build people. And for some reason, that just touches me. He's so humble in that, in what he says and what he does. And the other thing that jumped off the page at me with Quinn was his ability to stick things out, just to grind things out and to accept who he is. He's so comfortable in his own skin. And I think that's what makes Quinn really powerful, is that he's comfortable with who he is. It hasn't been an easy journey to get comfortable with who he is, but he's comfortable and he's confident in who he is. And I think that confidence jumped off the screen to me.
Yeah, I've been his words regarding creativity have been bouncing a lot of times in my quiet moments and just pondering. I wonder, and I ask myself, what does creativity look like in my life? And I'm obsessed with builders, probably because I am not one. But the idea of spiritually, especially the architect angle, right?
Yeah.
Because he builds things in his mind first. And that's that's a godlike attribute, right?
Yeah.
We know Heavenly Father created things spiritually before they were created physically. And I think that an architect who can see things that don't exist and then go make them exist is inspiring for us to be able to personalize it into our own lives, professionally, personally. But like, building things requires intent. Creativity requires intent, right? We wake up and we say, who am I going to build up today? We wake up and we say, how am I going to create today? And this ties into that epistle you wrote, right? Because these days, there's some inertia there.
Yeah.
It's hard to get off the ground, right? It may be hard to get out of bed today because of things like hopelessness, right? Uncertainty, unknown, pandemics, bad news. And so that spirit of creativity really, really resonated with me, and the comparisons.
For sure.
The comparison is a thief of joy. I think that's just a human condition, and Quinn spoke very authentically with vulnerability. That is something that he has worked to overcome, right?
Yeah.
Like getting, like you said, comfortable in your own skin kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think that, and I just look at Quinn, I admire him, and I think that he still sells himself short a little bit. And I think that, I just like watching his journey, because he's a builder of things, but he's a builder of people. And he just, maybe doesn't fully realize that he's a builder of people. But I think you're in that same boat. Right? You're a builder.
I also love the striking difference between him and his dad.
Yeah.
I thought that was great. Right? I mean, like, you can be you.
Yeah.
You don't have to do what your dad did. You don't have to be the kind of person that your dad was. You be you.
Yeah, right. Remember the story he told about being in high school and joining the choir group because that's what his brother did, right?
Yeah.
And then
and he was terrible at it.
What a great story, dude. I mean, that's just one of the. I mean, that was. I think that one of the things that the reasons I loved the episode with Quinn Lowry, and one of the reasons I love Quinn Lowry is because he's just as real as they get, right? He gives it to you, and warts and all, and I think that's when we really start to get deep relationships.
But that's this process, right? Like that. I love that Proverbs, iron on iron,
mm-hmm.
because every person that we've met on this podcast has been that iron on iron process. That we've got rough edges, right? And we tumble with these people. We share ideas. We get into their lives a little bit, and our rough spots hopefully chip off.
Yeah. And so if I'm going to say, what am I working on from Quinn Lowry's episode? Like you, that creativity thing has been bouncing in my head too. And I've just been trying to let it land in a spot that I can feel like I can be creative and be a builder. I want to be a builder. And so I'm working on that, right? One epistle at a time.
Yeah. Well, epistle, I'm going to give you this challenge, right? And I'm going to accept it myself. I think given that note, 5 years from now, 10 years from now is not going to just happen.
Yeah.
The person, I mean, the years will run, but the person I want to be 5 years from now, the person that I want to be 10 years from now, the dad, the husband, the employee, is not going to happen without some intentional planning.
Right. Absolutely.
So I'm going to challenge both of us in the spirit of Quinn Lowry to draw up that blueprint. Right?
Yeah.
Draw up that blueprint of what we're going to be like in 5 years. And it's going to be your business. It's not content for an episode. It's not content. It's not something that you need to share with me. But brother to brother, let's just honor what Quinn gave us and commit to do that homework.
All right, but in the spirit of the show, I'm not going to share it with the listening audience, but in the spirit of the show, I am going to be held accountable by you to what that looks like. So I am going to share mine with you, and you can tell me.
And I will share it with you as well.
All right.
And it's not a template thing. It can be written on a bar napkin, although I would not recommend you being in a bar. Right?
You have a few drinks, your 5 years make it look a little different than your drive. I don't know.
But it goes to that thing that I'm always talking about, I think, is just that drift.
Yeah, absolutely.
Drift versus that drive. And it is really easy to drift. Yeah. Especially in a world like ours today.
Yeah. Tell me, it's crazy, man. Well, let's we've talked a little bit about the idea of the Dawn Wall and bringing people with you. We've talked about being a builder and creating things, and then we talked to Gavin Spencer in episode 5. Talk to me about Gavin. What jumped out at you after talking to Gavin?
Our lives are made up of tiny hinge moments. I know that to be true, but no better example of that in my mind exists than Gavin Spencer. That day, when he's telling the story that he's at an honor choir in Oregon, and he gives the guy's name who comes from Minnesota and is working with these kids in this honor choir. And Gavin is moved by the gentleman. Gavin is moved by the music. And Gavin knows he just got a glimpse of what he will do with the rest of his life.
Yeah, I mean,
like what is that? And true to form, he has ran with that vision and he has killed it, right?
Yeah. And
that
I think
moment of clarity, that clarity.
Yeah. Well, and Quinn talked about the same thing, right? That idea of like, I knew. But I think it's important that maybe we also talk a little bit about, and not in great detail, but we can reference the fact that they both mentioned sort of that the pain of that journey to be what they wanted to be, right? I mean, I think if you look at Gavin Spencer in particular with what he's done with the program that he's been in charge of for however many years, you just look at him and go, this guy is like, he's the musical whisperer, right? I think things just happen. But the reality is he had to grind it out. And what he mentioned, there were times where I thought I was gonna walk away, from the position that he has now. So I think that the ability to set their eyes on a goal and to grind through those moments like that, that's what's impressive. That's one of the things that is really impressive to me about Quinn, and Gavin both, is that they both, like you said, they knew this is what I'm going to do. And regardless of the circumstances or the obstacles that stood in their way, they powered through it. And there's something to be said for someone that can just put their head down and plow through some obstacles,
Yeah, I'm thinking back on my notes from that episode and Gavin's answer, and it's a common one. You talk about themes. The question, what are you afraid of?
Yeah.
Do you remember? I don't want to put you on the spot. Do you remember Gavin's?
I don't. Remind me what Gavin said.
It was tied to his strength, actually, right?
That's right.
Like his standards are so exceptionally high for himself. And he has those standards. And we asked him why that is. And he said he's afraid of failure.
Right.
And he's afraid of letting people down. And there have been other guests that have had that same thought. And it really gets into like this pressure that men feel. And it's real. And I'm sure I know women feel it as well. It probably manifests itself differently in the life of a mother or a wife. But man, that pressure turning into his strength really inspired me, because a lot of people are afraid of failure, so they don't try.
Yeah, right.
Gavin is afraid of failure, and he will spend hours, right, killing himself to get it to his standard so that fear does not become a reality.
Yeah, and I think that everybody listening can relate to that, the fear of failure, right? I mean, and you could, insert the situation, whether that's work, whether that's family, whatever it is. I think we've all been there, and I think that's a very common fear.
Yeah, but I don't know. Have we gone on these episodes and these conversations with our guests? Have we gone to like Parable of Talents?
No, we have not.
So think about that story, and where does fear come into that?
Yeah,
right?
I mean, right.
People
Absolutely.
given some things and they double it. People given some things and they go out and they do the work. And somebody is given some things and says, no,
I don't want to lose these things.
I'm going to bury this because I don't want to lose the few things that I have. And basically the parable is that's not how it works. That's not why talents are given. And so when I think of Gavin Spencer, no one models the art of showing up better.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, that idea of do what you love and you know, is just it's inspiring. He's an inspiring guy. And shoot, you know, he's a darn good golfer too. That's another reason. So let's talk for a second though about John Crosby. I mean, I love that episode with John Crosby. You know, I think that John has he has some things that to offer people and some perspectives that maybe not everybody is. You know, it's a different lens altogether. But I loved hearing John's words, and I'd love to hear, Mike, what you took away from John and what you felt from John.
John, the conversation that we had with John Crosby came at an interesting time. Came at an interesting time for all of us, right? Because at that time there were some things that were happening that were coming. They were bringing issues to the kitchen table, and it had all of us thinking about our relationships with the world around us, right? With people that are different than us. It had us thinking about equality and justice. And for me, loud and clear, John Crosby is an example of compassion. And compassion is different than, hey, I feel your pain, right? And I think this even came up in the episode where empathy is, I feel your pain. Compassion is, I feel your pain and I'm going to do something. The things that I'm feeling are moving me to do something about it. And I'm going to do what I do out of love without judgment.
Yeah, I mean,
that was the lesson that John taught us masterfully.
Yeah, I thought, you know, I mean, I've had the opportunity to spend some time with John as you have, and with you and John together, and I've always been struck by sort of the evenness of his tone and the wisdom with that is kind of oozes from his sentences. And you know, one of the things he talked about in his episodes was that you just don't know what other people are going through, right? And you know, obviously that speaks to that word compassion. I think that's an entering point, right, to compassion. But yeah, that you know, to really kind of look at people and try to feel what they're feeling and help them get through it. I mean, that's been my experience with John Crosby, has been that he is a listener, and he is a guy that wants to know where you're coming from and understand it and see how he can help you get through it. And I mean, that's been a powerful lesson for me in applying it to, you name it, right? I apply that to my dealings with my kids. I apply that to my work, you know, you name it. That's I want to be like John Crosby when I grow up. That was my takeaway from John, you know.
Well, but if we were to connect some dots, right? I can think of something that Alan Michael Boston said that was very similar. You know, also a man quick to love others. He said, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but he said, you know what? I know everybody I come across is dealing with some things. So the last thing I want to do is add to that.
Yeah, I did love that. I remember just listening to that the other day. It's great.
So he lives his life trying to not add to the burdens of others.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, like there's just a couple of things that, like, if you had the floor in the United Nations and you could just share a handful of things from these 10 episodes, you would have a different world.
Oh, 100%.
Truly. If people could just try to not add to the burdens that people are carrying.
Yeah.
If people could care and care enough to act.
Right.
Right. Like I'm going to throw this out there. I'm going to commit myself. I've joked with Kelly all the time. Working in schools, there were some situations that would break your heart. And I would always kind of joke about, man, I almost came home with a kid today. And that kind of freaks you out, right? That's not something that you should really joke about. And
you're going to commit that you're going to come home with a kid tomorrow. Where are we going?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to commit to look into becoming a court-appointed special advocate.
Okay.
CASA.
All right.
It's the step before, right? I mean, so I'm not going to be a foster parent.
Okay.
But these kids are dealing with situations, and this thing has been kind of chipping away at me. And I'm just going to care enough to do something about it. In the spirit of John Crosby, I'm going to look into that and see if I can turn this care that I have for kids that are struggling and coming from hard backgrounds, if I can turn it into action and actually try to do something with it. So that's my homework assignment from John Crosby. Well, John did not give that to me, but to follow that example, I'm going to look into that.
I commend you for accepting that assignment, and I will gladly follow up with you on your progress.
Okay.
All right. I think that's great, Mike. And I will say, you maybe are not taking into account the good that you already do, right? And I think that maybe that's something that that you're discounting a little bit. I know a lot of kids that have had that have had some wisdom dropped on them from Mike Freeman that's put them in a better spot. So
yeah, but I think that this season, right? I mean, I think that there were other places, other scenes, other jobs, other responsibilities. You and I both have been in situations with different responsibilities than we have right now. And I think that right now, that responsibility burden doesn't feel so heavy. And so I think we've mentioned this before, right? When life doesn't feel so uphill, we need to pedal.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. I think
we need to make some progress and see. And really that comes in, that's a great segue. I don't know if you were heading there, but I don't know where we're at sequentially. I think I might have skipped somebody, but Kurt's episode. One of the things that came out very loud and clear for me is I want people talking about me when I'm gone like we talked about Kurt's mom.
Yeah, I mean that was a powerful episode. I and I think if we go back and connect the dots, right, on some of our episodes, think about some of these men that we've talked to and the influence of their mothers in their lives. I mean, it's pretty powerful stuff, right? And I think you and I have talked about that, in personal conversations about your experience with your mom, my experience with my own mother, and their influence on our lives. But think about that, like Kurt, he talked about it. I think Rajiv talked about it. Stephen Mitchell talked about it. Alan Michael talked about it.
Rajiv.
Yeah, Rajiv. I think that's what we need to hit here in a second.
Yeah.
But I think with Kurt, the discussion about his mom, and I mean, he got emotional, kind of bringing back those memories. But the other thing that stood out to me, the things that stood out to me about Kurt are directly related to his mother's teachings, right? When Kurt says, why wouldn't I wait out in front of that guy's house? I love him. And so I'm going to make sure he goes where he's supposed to be. Right. And when he was saying that, I can hear Kurt's mom saying, no empty chairs, boys. Right. It's the same principle. It's just he's just saying it in his own way. And so that was powerful to me with Kurt, to hear him say that. The other thing that I really loved is he talked about the importance of his religion and his commitment to his religion. And I think the title of that episode is "It Feels Like Home," right? And Kurt would say, I'd go into that building and I just had that feeling like this is where I'm supposed to be. And what I love about that is this idea that we need to be, as a people, more in tune to that feeling that Kurt's talking about, that says this is where I need to be, right? If we were more, you talk about if we had these 10 episodes and these guys were in front of the United Nations, what a different world. I mean, can you imagine if we all cut the noise down a little bit in our own lives to where we could hear or feel those thoughts that say, hey, Mike, this is where you need to be. I mean, man, I loved that. That was a good reminder to me. And that was one of my takeaways from Kurt, is that I want to be more in tune to that feeling. And I want to convey that to other people, right? I think that's happening.
There's so many ways to take that, right? Because we've gotten sappy on the show about saying goodbye to kids, right?
Right.
Kids leaving home.
Yeah.
And, how do we create that sense of a place where people want to come back?
Yeah.
And it's funny because you say, this is going to sound super lame maybe, but you say home and I think of, so here in Northern California, the Pacific Northwest, right? One of the amazing natural phenomena that we have is the salmon. And the salmon will be born in a stream, migrate to the ocean, and come back to the exact place they were born to spawn and die. And I don't know how they find from the Pacific Ocean, they find home. But Kurt uses that as a guiding influence in his life, right? He knows that feeling.
Yeah.
He knew it as a teenager. He knows it now. He's creating it with his kids. And that's funny because he's a long ways from home.
Right. Yeah.
And of all the people to be talking about feels like home, we get that lesson from a guy who's living on the other side of the continent.
The other side of the world. Yeah.
Or, sorry, not even continent.
Yeah.
We're going to cut that part out. We get that lesson from a guy living on the other side of the world. What a powerful, powerful lesson. And I say home to you, and you know what that feels like.
Yeah. And it's funny because I remember when I was moving from Redding, and we moved down here to San Diego, and I had my kids, who, to be honest with you, I thought they were going to be throwing a party that we were moving to San Diego. And the day that I told them, they all just started bawling. Tells you how much I'm in touch with what reality is. But I remember having that discussion with them when they were really sad about leaving, the friends and the familiar places of their Redding home. And I remember having that discussion about where our family is home, right? We create that environment together. We create those feelings together. And if it's in Redding, that's home. If it's in San Diego, that's home. If it's in the Republic of Georgia, that's home, right? And I think that takes some effort and some work to create that. And let's go back to where you first started with Kurt. It's his mom. His mom created a home. And I'll tell you, there was always boys that were not born into that family, and that was not technically their home, but that was their home because she created it, right? So some good stuff with Kurt. But let's do this, Mike. Let's backtrack for a second, one episode.
Sorry, I skipped over. Yeah.
And let's talk about Rajiv, because I knew Rajiv for about 15 minutes prior to that episode. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah,
right.
I've talked a lot. I mean, vicariously, you've probably known him because I've talked a lot about him in conversation. But yes.
Yeah. Let me throw a couple things out at you that I loved about Rajiv, because I was impressed with Rajiv. And look, someone asked me the other day. Someone asked me about the podcast, and they said, "How do you talk to someone for 2 hours?"
What they really mean by that is how am I supposed to listen to you?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Right. Yeah.
For 2 hours.
But what I told him is that people are interesting, and people have good stories, and there's some serious stuff that we can learn from these people, right? So let me tell you what stood out to me about Rajiv, okay? There was a lot, but I'm just going to give you 3 things that I love that Rajiv said. One was to be present. I love the idea of being present, that you're with your kids, right? You're present. The other thing he said is he talked about seeking out sacred moments and cherishing them. And I loved that. Some of the things that he described as sacred moments, I think would maybe change the definition of sacred moments for some people, right? And then the last thing that I really loved that I took away from Rajiv is to look at others for who they really are. And I love that. I want to make that a part of who I am on a daily basis, is to see people for who they really are. And I think if we do that, it's hard to get angry. It's hard to judge. It's hard to do all those things, right? If we just looked at the eternal and divine nature of people in general. So those are some things I love about Rajiv. Now I want to hear what you think, what you thought about Rajiv.
Well, I think it's funny that, I would stop at see people. I think Rajiv sees people. That story of seeing that girl.
Yeah.
Right. And that's actually, that turns into a hinge moment in his life. But I think with all of the hustle and the bustle, sometimes we don't see our surroundings. Right. There's a reference. Actually, this is funny because, Rajiv showed me this clip once of Michael Jr. Michael Jr. does comedy, right? Michael Jr., instead of trying to get laughs, he sees his job as trying to give people the opportunity to laugh and to give, not get. And he shares that perspective of giving and not getting changed the way he saw the world, right? He would step out of this comedy club and he would see a homeless person there. And he would go to the homeless person now because his mission was to give and not get, right? If you're trying to get, he sees a homeless person, he thinks that person has nothing to give me, right? Instead, he sees that person and he tries to go and give that laugh. And I think that when you see people, when you're really intent on seeing people, that's where you can be of influence and be influenced. And I learned that lesson from Rajiv. Rajiv sees people and he gets, I don't know how he does it, but he does have that in the moment presence where he's going to see people and see their needs. My heart is just going out to that guy right now. Think about it. He's got a school in India that he's running with all of this happening right now, right? So heart is full of just well wishes for the families and the kids in his school right now. Rajiv's episode really impacted me. You're writing epistles. I'm gonna go ahead and prophesy.
Okay, wow, I like this.
I think Rajiv's episode changed everything for our show. If you think about where it landed, right? We had talked to our good buddies. Before Rajiv, there were mutual good buddies.
Right.
and we were just hanging out with our friends on Zoom. Press record. Here we go.
Yeah.
Right. Rajiv was your first venture out into somebody you don't know.
Right.
Where you're trusting my judgment on bringing a guest into the show, and it delivered. I think that Rajiv's walk in faith is different than yours, different than mine, different than previous guests that we'd had before Rajiv. But it was wonderful in those conversations to see that there is more in common,
right,
than there is different.
Yeah, I think that was, I think that's, we've said that from the beginning, right? That we want to talk to people and at the end of the day, walk away with an understanding that we're more alike than we are different. And Rajiv was, I mean, Rajiv is, he's an amazing guy. And yeah,
So
what a powerful episode, man.
Let me tell you what I'm doing about it.
Okay, yeah, let's hear it.
That story, when he was at bedtime with his kids,
yeah,
I think his daughter said, he's on the phone, and his daughter grabs the phone, right, and says, "No, it's cuddle time. It's not phone time."
Yeah,
I have gone in and put a 2-hour limit on my phone, like a 2-hour limit for the day. And when that comes up, hopefully I have the self-discipline not to override the reminder, and I'm done, right? Because I think that Rajiv taught the importance and value of moments. And moments happen with people in our lives, not phones in our hands. And so 100%. That's one thing that that's one challenge that I'm putting on myself as a result of our conversation with Rajiv. And I don't need to get into how many hours I averaged before that, right? It's all about where I'm going with it, not where I was.
Feel like you're going to be a court-appointed advocate. You got your phone dialed down. What have I committed to in this episode, man? I'm like,
you got a 5-year plan.
I got a 5-year plan.
You got a 5-year plan. One of the things too that I loved about Rajiv, I love his story, because I will tell you, Tyler, and I think we've talked about this before. In our faith, in our church, in our culture, like specifically our church culture, we have this pressure to live on a script. Our kids feel a pressure to check boxes in certain order in their future, right? I'm going to graduate high school. I'm going to go on a mission, right? I'm going to come back. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have 2.7 kids, and I'm going, right? And it's this script. And Rajiv teaches us, blow that thing up. He's successful. He's working. He's making money. His friend says, "You want to quit and go on a bike ride?" He goes on a bike ride, bikes the British Isles, goes to Europe, and ends up doing charity work in Sri Lanka.
I think it's interesting too, because if you look at Rajiv, who goes and bikes across Europe for, I don't even know how long. It seemed like a long time.
It was years. It ended up being like a 3-year detour in his life.
Right. So he's doing that, and he does that, Mike, and ends up drinking tea in a coffee shop and seeing a young girl, and has this moment that changes his life, right? And so he's got to where he is because of that moment. And then we look at guys like Quinn Lowry and Gavin Spencer, who said, "This is what I'm going to do from the very beginning." It didn't take a 3-year bike ride detour to get there, but they're there, right? And I think that
we can point to people in our lives that have not had that moment yet.
Yeah, but to me, the beauty of it is that we are all trying to get there. It doesn't matter how we get there. It doesn't matter when we get there. What matters is that we get there, right? And I think that Rajiv would tell us that he wouldn't do it differently, right? But I think that Rajiv would tell us he's glad where he is now and not pedaling through Europe, right?
Yeah, and I think it's important that we get there. it's super important that we recognize when we are there. Can you imagine if Rajiv was on his phone in that coffee shop?
Well, Rajiv would have pedaled around Europe for another few years. But the thing is, I think the thing is we will get there. And sometimes, Mike, and I'll tell you from personal experience, right? Sometimes the opportunity to be there and be the better version of you presents itself, and I just wasn't ready to embrace it. And so guess what? I had to kick rocks down the path a little bit longer. I had to get beat up a few more times, and then say, oh yeah, you remember that one time back then? That's what I should have done. That was the time. And then we're there, right? And I think that it's important that we understand that you're right when you make the comment about church culture and checking boxes, because we don't need to check those boxes. Those things that are on that list are important things and can be important things, but we don't have to hit them on a certain calendar.
Yeah,
right?
I learned this from a guy. His name is Tony Smith. I believe he's the elected superintendent of instruction for the state of Illinois, right? So I'm in this conference session with him, and he says, he might be quoting somebody, but he says, when you walk with integrity, the path rises to meet your feet.
I like that.
And I agree with that, right? When you are being true to who you are, the situation to get you where you need to be is going to present itself. Now, you're right. Will you have the courage to accept it, right? When that door opens, will you have the opportunity to step through, or will you take a detour and be presented with it again, and be presented with it again until you realize that is the path that you're
can't run. You can't run from Nineveh. Is that what we would say? Right.
You cannot run from Nineveh, right?
I think I do. I love that. I think it's an important lesson for all of us to learn when we listen to all these different people, is that we want to be better. We want to be the best versions of ourselves, but that path there is different for everybody. And I think the journey on the path makes the destination that much sweeter. I think that if we can take those victories that we've had along the path and celebrate those, but we can take those difficult moments that may have the ability, or could have had the ability, to derail us, that we were able to overcome. I mean, think there's just so much power in that, to be able to look back and go, you know what? At that moment, I thought there was no way on God's green earth I was going to overcome that, but yet here I am, and I got some strength in me that I didn't know I had, and I love that idea. We get challenged and we can rise to the occasion. I do believe that. I mean,
I think it reminds me of a quote that you had in an episode. I think you said something like, maybe with Stephen, you said there is great power in finding victory over challenges and obstacles, right? And when we don't take that challenge or obstacle on, we lose that power.
Absolutely.
We don't gain it, right? We don't have it with us.
Yeah, and it feels good to be quoted, Mike. That's a good thing. But I think that I think that idea of you can't run from Nineveh, and maybe one of these times we'll explain that, right? But those things are going to come around. You're going to have to face things at some point in time.
Here's the direct quote.
Yeah.
From Tyler Gould. There's a lot of power in finding victory over the things that hold us back.
Yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate time to flex your muscle, right? And get some growth out of things.
Right. And when you don't take that opportunity, right? We talked about chains, good chains, bad chains, right? But when there are these chains that we are not breaking free of, we don't know the power in us. Goes back to that original quote, right? Those that don't move don't feel their chains.
Yeah.
And that's what I think that's what our guests are teaching us, right?
Can we agree on this, Mike Freeman? That we need to have Rajiv back on this show at some point in time. Like, I just loved that conversation with him. I was told you, I think, after we went off the air, I said, I don't know that dude, but I'd go to war for that guy. Right. He is something, man. And
really people come to us and they say, oh my goodness, it's 2 hours long. Oh my goodness, how did you do this? How am I going to listen to that? They don't understand the depth of these people.
Yeah, that's right.
When we're talking about richest men in town, and you're trying to encapsulate how that person became who they are and the ins and the outs of this rich life that they're living, 2 hours is not a lot of time.
No. And in fact, this is a great segue, Mike, because the next one I want to talk about is Alan Michael. And we are actually, we did 2 hours with Alan Michael, and we're actually recording again with Alan Michael tomorrow night, as a matter of fact, to kind of pick up on some things that we felt like we left out there that needed to be touched on. So let's talk about Alan Michael for a second. Again, this is a person that you didn't know prior to our pre-show phone call, and so talk to me about your experience with Alan Michael.
I would really love if this was a radio show right now, and we can put in a call for guests or people that have listened to Alan Michael's episode to call in, because for whatever reason, that guy's episode has blown the charts.
Yeah.
Right? He came out and people immediately jumped all over that episode. And I would love to know what about his story resonated with our listeners. The thing that I take away from Alan Michael Boson, there's a quote when he's talking about his service in the mission. And he says, I would always tell missionaries, never underestimate the power of God or the Spirit of God in the life of a person that wants to change. Because he was talking about how he wasn't doing anything right as far as trying to be true to the faith or living the commandments or, honoring the words of his parents. He was a college football player at a D2 school away from home. And he said fall semester was a party, right? He had a girl at home that he was not necessarily being faithful to. He had no business receiving any kind of light or revelation from God. But the second he started feeling bad about it, he said God poured into him. And I love that. I think I'm on the record as saying that I see a lot of personal parallels between Alan Michael Boston's story and my own, including my football skills.
Well, Mike, I will say you were a pretty good flag football early morning old man league football player. So, but I agree with you though. I do see a lot of parallels in your story with Alan Michael's journey as well, and I didn't pick up on that until you had mentioned that, but yeah, they're right there.
I'm trying to think of how he ended, right? And really it was really a pause, because we're right back at it, because he's got so much more, life experiences to draw from. So we'll be bringing him back. But I think he ended in the New Testament, talking about a woman bathing the Savior's feet with her tears. And that she had been forgiven much. And for that reason, she loved much. And his ability to love other people was really what resonated in you and your family, in your experience with him. And I think he lets you in on that a little bit.
Yeah.
He loves people because he's had that love extended to him, because he's needed that love in his life.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, Alan Michael Boston's going places, man. Right? Can we agree on that? This guy, let's just hang on to this dude because he's going places and we just want to be able to say we knew him at one point in time, right?
Yeah, we can basically say it all started with us.
That's right. I mean, I thought that his, there's a couple things one thing that you said just now, you talked about his experience with maybe not deserving to hear things, but when he was ready, it poured into him. Does that sort of sound like Stephen Mitchell as well to a certain degree?
Stephen talks about how he was desert.
Right.
He was desert and the rain started falling and it was like, it made me think of Alan Michael Boston reading Proverbs, reading the New Testament and watching televangelists.
Yeah.
He couldn't get enough, right?
What a journey, man. I think that that Alan Michael, he's a powerful guy. 30 years old, man. I don't even think he's 30 yet. I think he's 30 this year, but he's got some things that he taught you and I, and reminded me that I want to make sure that I'm focusing on, and one was, I love how he was very much, you just talked about the salmon, right? Kurt Holmgren coming home. One of the things that really stood out from Alan Michael was knowing where you came from, right? He referenced his roots, in that small town in the country, and kind of knowing what his maybe extended family was up to, and his parents really trying to shelter him and his brothers and sisters from that. I love that again, recurring themes, right? He talked about how he could always remember his mom, even though they weren't going to church. She was always talking about,
because it was an hour drive, brother.
Hour drive. They did that for a year. Like, come on now.
Hour.
Come on now. That's crazy. But he just that idea of his mom, listen to his mom's words, and then the other thing I loved about Alan Michael is this principle that he talked about of when you know truth, you chase after truth, right? You gotta find it, and you gotta grab onto it, and you gotta hold on to it, and that lesson was taught to him by his father, right? He talked about his dad's search for truth, and when he had it, he held on to it, even though maybe he wasn't making that hour drive anymore. He never doubted his experiences, and think about that. Years later, his son at a D2 school, right? The dad's parting advice was, read the book of Proverbs and the book of Mormon. It'll make you a better football player, right? That advice helps to turn Alan Michael into who he is today.
Well, but you think of that ripple effect from that original experience, and that makes me think of Stephen.
Yeah, right.
Stephen got real sharing that experience on the road to Trinity to work with those kids, right?
Yeah.
And how can anybody hearing that doubt that Stephen Mitchell had an experience that drew him closer to the Savior than anything he'd ever experienced before or after, right? Like, that was a major turning point in Stephen Mitchell's life, similar to Alan Michael Boston's father.
Right.
And the rest is history. That moment changes him. That moment he goes and he starts to soak up the word, right? He's a dry desert, and it's just raining on him.
Yeah, and let's just go ahead and dive right into Stephen Mitchell, right? Because one of the things that I thought was great is that you asked the question, I believe, in some variation of, what miracles have you seen, or something to that effect, right? And that guy, like, without hesitation, I think he said which one. That may have been his response, right? And he conveys this experience that is almost like it happened yesterday, right? And it was how many years ago? 20 some, 30 some years ago, and he's telling it like it just happened yesterday. And I love that he has always been able to kind of recognize those events, and then he doesn't let them slip away. He keeps them right there in his front pocket and with his hand around it, so he knows exactly where it's been and where he's coming from. I thought that was an awesome thing.
You know, and I'm glad we're having this episode, and I'm glad we're having this opportunity to reflect, because in my reflection after recording that episode with Stephen, I feel like I need to repent a little bit, because I think I'm in that record saying that I don't have moments like that. And in my quiet moments, it's come to me that, yeah, I have had some moments that I have let slip, that I've forgotten, that I'm not as quick and ready to discuss like Stephen, and that needs to change, right? I was on my mission. It's 1995. I'm in a plaza, right? I'm wearing a white shirt and tie. I'm in Uruguay, and I'm with 8 to 10 other white shirt and tie Americans. We stand out like sore thumbs, right? It's a hot summer night. I'm about 2 weeks away from the end of my mission, and I'm eating ice cream. And I'm eating ice cream like a fat kid, right? A big old bowl of ice cream. I'm scooping it up. As I'm finishing, I'm slurping. I'm raising the bowl to my mouth, and I'm slurping the rest of the ice cream out of the bowl. As I lower the bowl, I'm struck by something in my eye. Almost felt like I'm shot, right? I drop down. Everybody in my company drops down, and we're freaking out, right? They run to me. We get out of that scene and jump into a building and try to assess the damage. I can't see out of my eye. One of the people I was with had the wherewithal to reach down and pick up what I was shot with. It was a fence hook, one of those U hooks, right? With two pointy ends. I was struck with the U part and not the pointy ends. If I was struck with the pointy ends, I would probably have a glass eye and have a really cool party trick, right? But the way that thing rotated out of some slingshot or something, miraculously, I was better the next day, right? I tried to get some eye care. I was in South America, and they said it'd be 3 or 4 weeks. I said, you know what? I'm 2 weeks away from the best eye care in the country, so I'll just wait.
Right. Yeah.
You know? So I swept that under the rug, right? Here we are talking about miracles, and Stephen was so quick and ready. I think even in the tape, I was like, man, Stephen, that was so impressive how you were so ready to share that story. I don't have a story like that. Bumpkus. We all do. We all need to be better at remembering those stories.
Like, and maybe like not just remembering, but maybe calling them what they are. You know, I think that a lot of times we just go, you know, I joke about this all the time, but it's like when things are going bad, I'm praying like nobody's business, you know, please bail me out of this.
Please, Heavenly Butler.
Yeah. When things are going good, I'm like, dude, I am so good. Right. So I think that there's like this, we need to be quicker to call them what they are, you know? I mean,
and how
many times something said that, man, that was lucky. Right. I mean, it happens all the time.
Yeah. You don't hear words like miracle.
No.
And you don't hear angels either. No one's talking about miracles. No one's talking about angels, but that stuff hasn't gone away. In fact, I thought it was interesting that Stephen Mitchell is talking about how he would tell that story to non-believers.
Yeah, I know.
And non-believers would be almost like Lazarus, right? Like that story where people would be like, yeah, I don't really believe that happened like that.
So, right. Go back with me a minute here. All right. Let's talk about something for a second. We're in Hawaii. Okay. Me and you, and Toby Crawford and Quinn Lowry and our wives. We're all in Hawaii.
Picture that. 8 people in a hot tub.
Yeah, we're on a hot tub. We're having drinks. We're having our non-alcoholic beverages, and
first night.
Yeah, and the pool is just about 15 yards away, and we're sitting in there, and I think all the guys say, "Let's go dive into the pool. Let's dive into the pool, man. We've been in this hot tub," and so we all get out of the pool like a bunch of kooks that we were, and we go running across that deck, and for whatever reason, no one dives.
I lead with a cannonball. I yell cannonball.
Yeah, you cannonball. I think I followed suit, and it was what, 2 feet if we're lucky. 2 feet deep.
We bounced.
There was a lot of bruised tailbones. Okay, look. Well, I don't know what we're going to call this there, but there was potential. I think about that all the time.
That would have been tragic.
That could have been a major tragedy.
It would have been 4 quadriplegic, right?
And we all, so let's just leave that there, right where it's at. Okay.
Great moment. Kind of like Toby talking about his daughter at the campfire.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where we have these moments, and it's interesting because for every person that bounces on a tailbone and doesn't break their neck, there is unfortunately accidents where people do have things happen to them.
Yeah.
Right. And I can't make sense of why some things happen and why some things don't happen, but I'm grateful that did not happen that night.
As am I, my friend. And I think the lesson from Stephen Mitchell is call the miracle what it is, and don't be ashamed to share it with people, right?
Oh, I know, but there's so much more, right? There's so much more to Stephen's.
Oh, yeah.
Our time that we had together, like I'm haunted honestly by his voice in my ear saying, "What are you going to do about it?"
Well, I'll tell you.
What are you going to do about it?
I'll tell you this, Mike Freeman. I have shared the story about the hamburgers probably a half a dozen times since that episode was aired. And I'm completely flabbergasted, for lack of a better word, at that whole change your sign idea, right? What are we projecting? What do we really want out of life? And what are we telling people? And then when we don't get what we want, we're bitter, right? Shoot, all I want is to go down to LA for a job interview, and I'm getting all these stinking hamburgers.
You got burgers.
But your sign says hamburgers, man. I mean, dude, I love that. I
also thought his answer, hey, why aren't more people trying? Right? Why are people settling for fine?
Yeah, right.
He said too much trouble.
Yeah.
And he talked about pride.
Yeah.
And pride being the granddaddy of them all.
Yeah. But we can go back to with Stephen. We can rewind to Alan Michael. We can rewind to Kurt Holmgren. We can rewind to Gavin Spencer talking about his mom. We can rewind to Toby Crawford talking about overhearing his dad willing to give up an organ for a loved one. And then we can hear Stephen Mitchell talk about his mom handing him a $5 bill to go give it to the waiter in the restaurant. And then you fast forward in Stephen's life, and he's driving down the road and sees a guy holding a sign for a hamburger. And Stephen Mitchell pulls over into a parking lot and goes and buys a hamburger to go give it to this guy, right? The words and the influence that these parents, and for the most part, mothers, had on these men is astounding. And it's really made me be more aware. I've written down things that my mom's done for me since Stephen's episode, because I'm just like, dude, how have I missed those things? I'm a product of that, I'm a product of what my mom told me to do. And I love that Stephen talked so eloquently about his mom's influence and his dad's. But man, I love that, right? That's a common thread that's been woven throughout each episode.
Yeah, I think that the power of this project is that we are clay, right? That we are not dead, we are not done. I fear time. I think I've always struggled with time, running out of it, right?
Yeah.
I think that this life is so amazing, and we have so many influences. I sent you that Goodwill Hunting clip, right?
Yeah.
Right. Your move, Chief, where he's just coming off as a cocky kid, and Robin Williams' character's like, look, you don't know anything about this thing called life.
Yeah.
Right. You think you've loved a girl maybe, and so you think you know about love, or you've read some poetry, or you read some Shakespeare, and you know about war, and you don't know. Right. And there are some things that I don't know, but the beautiful thing about this little experience is we get to see what we don't know.
Absolutely.
We get to sit down with people that do know, and they don't know everything. And I think every person to a T can be quoted at some point. We can pull audio that has them saying, I don't really know what I'm doing.
Yeah, right.
And we've often joked about using that as maybe a soundbite or two.
Right. Yeah.
But they do.
Yeah.
They have crushed it out of the ballpark a couple of times, and they've struck out, right? But I feel like clay, and I feel like they're influencing and shaping and forming me into a better person. And if that's happening for other listeners, right? Over 2,500 downloads at this point, man, that kind of puts a smile on my face.
Yeah, and if it's not happening for our listeners, it's happening for me. And that was the point of our podcast from the beginning, right? We said, you and I, we're going to selfishly try to become better, and that was the journey that we decided to set out on with this. Man, tonight has been awesome. Like, I feel like it was the opportunity to raise a glass to our guests, and just remember, right? Again, our theme, remember the things that they've taught us.
And really to celebrate, right?
Yeah.
To celebrate their contributions, because they were nervous. This podcast thing is not the water they usually swim in. But every one of them stepped up and showed up and were true to who they were, and taught masterfully the things that we needed, right, in our hearts and in our homes.
Yeah, I think one of these days, Mike, we need to get all these guys together in a room with each other and let them talk.
Not a Zoom room.
Not a Zoom room.
An actual room.
Yeah, when we can be de-COVIDed and we can get in a room together again, when we let these guys talk to each other, and I would bet there would be some embraces because people feel close after opening up the way that they have over the past 11 episodes,
So Tyler, 11 episodes in, what does it mean to you to be the richest man in town?
To be surrounded by people that care about you and that challenge you to be better. And 11 episodes in, I have met new people that I haven't known before. I've reconnected with people, and I've sat with people that I know very well. And I've walked away feeling rich, feeling like I don't deserve what I've got, but feeling blessed.
I'm smiling over here because we've often said that the goal of this program is we'll sit down with people and we'll ask them questions about their life, and halfway through we'll see a look in their eye and we'll know that they understand how rich they truly are. And I see that look in your eye right now, brother. That warms my heart. So grateful for you. So grateful that we took a stab at this. And there's work to be done, because when you start looking at the world, looking for teachers to teach you how to live a rich life, the path rises to your feet. And we are getting opportunities to see people around us a little differently now. And everybody's got a story.
Yeah.
Not everyone is going to be on the show.
Right.
But I believe that everyone does have a story. I believe everyone's got baggage, right? Everyone's got challenges and trials. But as we sit down and talk to people that have been on this path and have demonstrated that they might know a thing or two about how to be successful in this life, that's where we find the courage and the strength to go on, to continue.
Yeah.
I just want to put something in the back of your brain.
Yeah, go for it.
2 things. Every day, 122 people die in this country because they take their own life. Right now, suicide is the number 2 cause of death for people ages 10 to 17. I'm just saying that we've got work to do. And I'm hoping that we can be voice of hope for people that may feel like there is no hope. That this life is the most precious gift we've been given. The worst day is better than no more days. And if we can be a part to shine a light to people in darkness all day, every day, Tyler Gould, I'm here. I appreciate you. I appreciate our friendship. But man, if we can do something with this, let's go. Right?
Hey, I love it. Well said. And I think that I hope that people listen to the podcast and they think, man, Stephen Mitchell's an interesting guy, or Kurt Holmgren, that's an interesting guy. But I would say this, that every day you're surrounded by some interesting people. Sit down and ask some questions. Learn about the people around you and see how rich you are.
I would even go a step further. Send a name our way.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? I mean, I think we're going to get more formal in this, and we're going to, down the road here a little bit, we're going to formalize the process where you can let us know of some folks that might have a story to tell us. But man, if you've got some people, jump on our Facebook, jump on our Instagram, send us an email at rmitpodcast@gmail.com, because we're all ears.
Yeah, there's some good stuff coming down the road. We've got some great guests lined up. This is a journey. We've said it many different times, but the road doesn't end here. There's a lot that the people around me would tell you that I need to learn. And so I'm going to keep talking to people until I can get some things figured out. But listen, Mike Freeman, it's been a blast tonight, man. I loved kind of reminiscing, going, we're so old, Mike. We've done 11 episodes. We've been doing this for 2 months. But
I think it's just great. I think that this is valuable, Tyler, and we probably need to do it from time to time just to make sense and to make meaning of what has been poured in, because there is a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot, and to be true to the lessons and true to the teachers, I think it's great for us to tap the brakes and say, what does all this mean? What does this look like? What are we working on? How can we make sure that this is sticking in our lives?
Yeah.
Always good to hang out with you, man. Always good to catch up. And, and then we'll get back into this guest thing next week.
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, everybody out there in podcast land, if you like the show, make sure that you get onto Apple Podcasts, you give us a review, and keep listening. We'd love to hear from you. Get on our social media at Facebook, on our Instagram, or drop us an email, and we'd love to hear your thoughts and your opinions and ways that we can help bring people into your life that will make an impact. So let's take the things that we talked about today. We refreshed our memories on some of our favorite people, and let's put some of those things into action. Mike, I've got a list of things I got to hold you accountable for after this episode, and I owe you a 5-year plan. So until next time, my friend.
All right.
Good idea, Ernie. A toast to my big brother George, the richest man in town.